I don't know if it will actually let me record, but we're gonna give it a whirl. Okay, guys, so in order for us to be able to get credit on these, I need to please make sure that everyone keeps their camera on. Okay. I have to be able to show that you guys actually attended the class. If your camera is not on, I have no way of verifying that. So for those of you guys that are here, here's your packets. Please make sure that everybody's signed in. Okay. I don't know if Coco or Esme, excuse me, is on here.
I'm here, Brian.
Hi, Esme. Could you go ahead and for those that want copies of the packets to follow along, can you guys please put your email address in the chat, and then Coco can forward you guys the packets so that you guys can follow along. Don't worry, if not, hold on here. You got to earn find it here. Okay. All right. So, perfect. All right, guys, we're gonna get going. Can you guys see the screen?
Yes.
Can you guys now see the class? Okay, great. All right, so first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna talk about what forms we're gonna be talking about today. The right to sell, coming soon, delayed marketing and non-MLS, status change input sheets, short sale addendums, and buyer's personal service agreements. Okay, all of these forms have had recent changes. So for those of you guys that may have taken this class in the past, I want you to know that this is definitely a different class than the past because forms lately seem like they last about 5 minutes before they decide to change the forms and make me redo this class over again. So if you have not taken this class, just know that it is new. And if you have taken it, just know it's new. So, okay, 1 second here. Let's see if anybody else is looking to add on. Looking like we're good to go. Esme, it looks like we got all the folks in the chat, so you can send them their stuff.
Yep, will do.
Okay, so the first thing we're gonna do is a quick little activity. I'd like you guys, and for those of you guys in Zoom, it's a little bit harder. David, we gotta make sure that your camera's on or I can't get you credit for this class. So please make sure that you get your camera on. It's a state law that anybody that does Zoom training has to have their camera on at all times. So if you could pop that on for me, I'd appreciate it so I can make sure you get credit, okay? I don't see if anybody else has their camera off. Keith is having lunch, so that's good. At least I know he's here. Soldotna, Renee, or whoever happens to be in the Soldotna office. If we're gonna have people attending, please turn the camera on. If there's nobody there, don't worry about it. But if they want to get credit, they need to be on a camera so that I can see them. So. Again, David, I don't know if you heard me, but we need to get your camera on, okay? Coco, if you could stay on top of that for me, I'd appreciate it, okay? So what we're gonna do first is a group activity. And for those of you guys on Zoom, it's harder to do a group activity, but you guys can communicate with each other and talk on the Zoom if you'd like to. But we're not gonna take quite 10 minutes. But what we are gonna do is I would like you guys to come up with 3 things that you would want to have with you or do ahead of time when you're gonna go to a listing appointment. Okay, what would you want to have with you? What information would you want to know? What would you think would be most helpful to have prepared for a listing agreement or a listing consultation besides just the listing agreement? Okay. There's a lot of information that you want to know about a listing before you list a property. What are those things? So I'm going to give you guys 3 to 5 minutes to kind of come up with a list on what you guys think might be good to have. And then we're going to reconvene here in about 3 to 5 minutes. And I'm going to ask everybody, what are their thoughts? Now, for those of you guys in Zoom land that think that because you're in Zoom, means you can just stare at the computer and not participate. Guess what? That's not how Brian does class. So I will be asking you guys to participate and to give us feedback and information. And I will also be asking for some of you guys to read some of the slides that are on here because I don't like to listen to myself talk for 2 hours and I don't expect that you guys do either. So I will be asking for some of you guys to pitch in and read. And the other thing that is for sure, that if nobody volunteers, then I start pulling out and voluntolding people to read. So if you would like to read the least amount, when you see a screen with less text on it, volunteer, right? But we're gonna get you going. Hey, David, how you doing, buddy? Good to see you. Okay, so take a few minutes. Let's come up with some things on what you guys think would be important to have with you at a listing appointment. Go ahead.
CMA.
Okay, CMA is helpful. Yep. It's good to know.
An AREC.
Yeah, so before you start volunteering your answers, combine a list of 3 so that we can talk about it all at one time. So you guys are free to communicate, write down whatever you guys choose to. Okay? Very quiet in here. This is a group activity.
Okay, it's Erica on Zoom. I'll say 3 things. So I'm going to look up if there's an old MLS report, the tax records, a seller listing questionnaire, in addition to the CMA and an AREC.
Okay, those are good ideas.
I would add a total market overview to that too.
So TMOs, yep, great to have.
Wings.
What?
Wings.
What?
Wings.
Leans, so maybe a title search of some sort?
Yeah.
Yeah. Always good. Coco, please make sure, or Esme, please make sure we're getting attendance down so that I can add them to the list. Thank you. Keep going. There's lots of them. I mean, there's lots and lots of things that you can have to be prepared.
Yeah.
I don't think you can really be over prepared for a listing. I don't think that's a thing.
What if a property has well and septic?
Hmm.
You can look up DEC records.
Very good.
Yeah. Documents from an old MLS listing, like previous property disclosures, that sort of thing. Even something for the seller, like how to prepare your home for a listing, that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. Also good options. What else?
Tax records came from that office.
Yeah. The peanut gallery is chiming in with some good ideas. I said the peanut gallery is chiming in with good ideas.
Tax records?
How to stage.
Staging information potentially.
Yeah.
Yeah, staging can make a big difference. Okay. What else? Who online has a couple? Erica, what are your thoughts?
I'm also gonna bring a seller net sheet.
Ooh, I love it. Net sheets very valuable. We'll be talking about net sheets later on in the conversation. If you're doing a listing agreement without a net sheet, you're doing it wrong. Okay.
I also bring a checklist in addition to and I take photos as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just with my
photos.
camera or my phone rather.
Yeah. Yeah. Keith, what do you got? What do you take to a listing appointment?
Someone already kind of said it, but like, I comps, the AREC, an agreement. I like the idea of, the net sheet. I haven't been doing that, but I've been talking to people about it, just not actually written down. It's a good question. I guess that's typically what I bring.
So some of those things are it's kind of a little bit awkward to bring some of those things to the listing appointment. Like a net sheet, something that you would probably want to bring and have available on your computer so that you can, once you've decided on a price, put that net sheet together. And depending on if it's your very first appointment there, whether or not you bring a CMA or comps is gonna be up to you. I know that if you bring a CMA and you've never been in the property, sometimes the question is, well, how the heck did you know what my property is worth? You've never been here. So that's something you gotta wanna be a little bit careful of. And make sure that that CMA has a range, because many times in my career have I gone to a listing appointment thinking one price, and then I get there and I find out either it's been recently completely remodeled, which changes the numbers, or it hasn't been touched in many years and is desperately needing help, which can also really affect those numbers. So putting a range in your CMA, I think, is vital, because you don't know what the condition is until you get there. Right? And then there's also things like, maybe the previous listing says it's a 4-bedroom, but it's actually a 5-bedroom, or maybe it's actually a 3-bedroom, things like that, which can really affect the value that you come up with on your CMA. So how you bring a CMA is going to be up for discussion, but that's for a CMA class, not for a listing agreement class. But having comps is very important. Okay. So having that previous MLS listing is great, because what kind of information can you get from a previous listing? What they bought it for. Yeah, like what did they pay for it? That could be a good information. Maybe were they afforded the ability to get closing costs from a seller, because that might be something that you can discuss with them about how you would like to proceed with a potential offer down the road. Also, what was the previous condition compared to what it is when you walk in the door? If you have pictures from 5 years ago that have an old kitchen with old carpet, and you can go in and you can say, hey, looks like you guys have done some remodeling here. You got a new kitchen, you got new flooring. I saw on your previous listing that none of this was here. That's amazing. Good job. Now let's start having this conversation, right? So you get a lot of information. Previous disclosures is also a great thing to get out of that previous listing. Also, sometimes inspection information will come in that previous listing information, right? Some title information can sometimes come up with that. Maybe the CC&Rs for the neighborhood can come in that previous listing. So the previous listing, it can be a huge amount of information that's valuable. I will also say that a little bit guarded, because not every listing is 100% accurate, right? So sometimes you can get a little bit misled by the previous listing as well, but there's usually a lot of valuable information in that previous listing. So tax records, municipal or borough tax records, super important to have. Again, they're not always 100% accurate. The one thing that I will tell you about previous tax records and going to like the borough sites and things like that is a lot of those sites have great information about topography, about lot lines, about potential encroachments. Although now they actually have a little thing on the website in the borough that says this is for information purposes only. Please don't, buy a house based on that information. A lot of times a satellite overview can give you a lot of information about the lot that maybe you won't be able to see by just standing in front of it, right? So there's really good information on that website for that. A lot of people say they like the taxes because it gives you value. How many of you guys have had enough time in the business to realize that the values on your tax records mean absolutely nothing? They mean absolutely nothing. A big raised hand by Keith. Absolutely. They mean absolutely nothing. And the reason for that is in the state of Alaska, we do not tell people what we pay for a home. And they generally don't have access to the MLS. So they're supposed to go through once a year and assess every home in the municipality or the borough. And the reality is they just don't have those resources. So some neighborhoods maybe have their values really high because they've been recently in that neighborhood. And sometimes they kind of hedge their bets knowing that I'm not going to be back over here for another 3 to 5 years. So you may be even a little bit above what the actual value is if they know they're not coming back for a while. And some may have not been through that neighborhood in who knows how long. So the values may be really low. So you got to be careful with that. Go ahead, Sharon.
I was just going to add to that, for those of you that are new, it's also important to note that we're a non-disclosure state. So what's on the tax record, they don't know what we've bought or sold properties for unless we tell them.
Yeah.
So that's just important to note, and it's something that you can relay to your clients that, hey, we're a non-disclosure state. You know, the tax authority has a certain responsibility to try to get it, you know, get the value according to maybe what's been reported in the area, but it's not always accurate. So appraisers are looking at, you know, our MLS data.
Yeah.
instead.
The appraisers are gonna do basically the same thing we do with the market analysis, right? So DEC records, and recorder's office, this is really important for you to have if there's been any, you wanna look for any kind of maybe open permits that may be available, wouldn't be on the DEC site, but you know, you wanna look for open permits, you wanna look on the DEC sites for, your well, your septic, excuse me, what kind of septic maybe you have. In the valley, it's kind of hit and miss whether it's actually in the DEC or not. They have really cracked down on making sure that information is in there lately, but that doesn't mean it always is. But the DEC office is a great way to find out about your wells or your septics. The Welts log is another you can go to, WELTS, Welts log. That will tell you about wells in the area a lot of times. Okay, so those are great to check. Title companies, look at asking for a property profile. You can ask for a property profile, it's free. And you can reach out to the title company if you got a little bit of heads up notice that you're going to that listing appointment. And they can get you a lot of the information that goes along with that home, CC&Rs and things like that. Most importantly with that is who are you talking to and are you even able to sell this home? There's nothing worse than going to a listing appointment and finding out one of two things. One is the person that you're talking to cannot sell the home, so you're completely wasting your time. Or maybe there's more than one person that needs to be there to have that conversation. And if there's more than one person that needs to be in the conversation and you have that conversation with one of them, what does that mean? It means you get to have the conversation again with the other person. So please make sure that if you go and get this property profile, one of the things that you want to do is make sure that all people can be in attendance so that you don't have to do 5 listing appointments for the same property. Okay? So knowing who's in charge and who's able to sign is vital, and that's a great way to get that information. TMO, we talked about that. TMOs are great. Comps in general are great to have. So those are important to have with you as you move forward for the listing agreement. Anything else that you guys can think of? Maybe neighborhood information, right? Maybe having information about what amenities are in the neighborhood, right? If you live in a neighborhood that has a park, maybe it's really good to know that information so that when you come to that listing appointment, you can say, hey, I really like this neighborhood. I know there's a park over there. I know you have walking trails here. And let me tell you what, if you know the neighborhood as well as they do, that really gives you an advantage when you're coming into that listing appointment because you know the area and they feel your expertise before it even starts, right? The other thing that I would say about preparation for a listing appointment is if you're underprepared, they will know. If you prepare properly, they will not know how long you may or may not have had your license. Okay? So if I show up to a listing appointment and I have all this great stuff and all this information, I know the neighborhood, I know everything that there is to know about the property, and I show up to that listing appointment, the chances are going to be really good that they're not going to care or ask how long you may or may not have been in the business. They're going to think you know what you're doing, so they don't even need to waste their time asking. Now, you may volunteer that you've been in the business for X amount of years, but if you don't come prepared, and you don't know anything about the property or the neighborhood, no matter how long you've been in the business, they're gonna say, how long have you had your license? Because you don't seem like you know very much about this property or this neighborhood. So you're setting yourself up for failure, okay? So being ultra prepared for the listing agreement appointment is gonna lead to getting a listing agreement. Okay, so everything you can bring with you. Another thing that I'd like you guys to consider doing before you go to a listing appointment is going to alaskarealestate.com or whatever is your trusted site for statistics and pulling up the statistics for the type of property that you're working with. alaskarealestate.com has really good supply and demand, active listings, how many active listings are on the market, what is the average sales price, you know, how many properties have sold in the last month. This is all really good information to have with you when you go to the listing appointment, because a lot of people go to listing appointments and they say, I'm Brian Sherburne, and I'm here to tell you what I think your house is worth, and you should list it for that because I'm Brian Sherburne, and you should just believe me. Okay, that may work for some people. I have not been very successful with that method in the past. So for me, I like to make sure that I have the statistics with me so that I can sit down and say, hey, this is what the market is telling us that's going on right now. These are not my statistics. These are statistics that come from the MLS that I have no part in generating. And this is going to give us an impartial view of what is the market doing right now. And we can narrow that down as tight as you would like to, because what I'd like to do is I'd like to be able to bring the statistics to show what is the overall market doing, what is the market in your area doing, and then the CMA brings it down even closer to compare it with what your property is to other similar properties, right? So statistics are one that's not on here, and it's not on here on purpose because I'd like to, oh, what's that mean? Oh, no. Are you guys all still on there? Just fine?
Yeah.
Okay, well, as long as you guys can still see my screen, I don't know what that was all about. But you want to make sure that you have those statistics with you if you can print those off, because that's going to give you the ability to get information that's not directly coming from you, and a lot of sellers really like that. Okay. Exclusive right to sell. Here's where we're going to start reading. Who likes to read? Who likes to read?
You can do this one.
Okay, go ahead. Jeremy's gonna go ahead and read. Let me get this out of the way for you here.
Exclusive right to sell. Blank seller hereby employs and grants brokerage and brokerage's designated licensee the sole exclusive right commencing on date and expiring at 11:59 p.m. on date the term to sell or exchange the real property situated in city or area zip in the recording district, state of Alaska, commonly known as address and or legally described as legal the property. Who
Okay.
owns the listing in terms of contract?
Okay, perfect. All right, so I would say the one thing that's missed the most on this part of this contract is the recording district. Please make sure that you fill out the recording district. That is probably the thing that, as I'm reviewing documents, gets missed the most is the recording district. I'm not sure why, but it's very common that that gets missed. So make sure that you know the recording district that you're in. If you're in the Valley, it's Palmer. If you're in Anchorage municipality, it's Anchorage. What do you have, Keith? What is your recording district down there in old Southeast Alaska?
It's easy. It's just Sitka.
Sitka. Easy. Nice. Okay, so make sure you know the recording district that you're in so that you can get that in there. Who owns the listing?
The broker.
Broker. Coming from a broker, right? He knows what's going on over there. The broker owns the listing. That is correct. Now, used to be previously that the broker owned everything. We have over the last 15 or so years kind of pared that down so that the agent has more control. But it used to be everybody worked specifically for the broker. Broker had control of everything. Everything went through the broker. It's kind of changed now because they realize that with big companies like Keller Williams and others, that the broker is not possible. It's not possible for the broker to have his finger on every single document that comes through on a transaction. So it's kind of been pared down to the agent as far as the responsibilities. But the broker still owns the listing. So therefore, when you transfer to another office or anything like that, you have to ask permission for that listing to transfer with you, but the broker actually owns the listing. Okay. What is a common term of a listing contract? What do you guys out there in Zoom world or here in person? What do you guys put on for the term of the contract? So your time that you have your listing, what are you guys putting on those? Anybody?
I put on either 6 months to a year.
6 months to a year. Yep, that's probably the most common. depending on what the property is. Anybody else have any input?
I just say we usually pick 2 dates specifically, like end of June, end of December, so that you're not surprised by an expiration date. You know that those are the 2 times a year that you need to make sure that you are renewing any listing agreement that may still be in place.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Just doing a couple of specific times throughout the year that all of them are gonna expire so that you know when they're gonna expire.
Mhm.
That's a good idea. Anybody else? No? I think those are probably the 2 most common is 6 months in a year. For me, single family residence, I do for 6 months. Vacant land or commercial, things like that is gonna usually be a year. Right? Those things tend to take a little bit longer. But I generally don't go less than 6 months. There are people out there that say, hey, I'm willing to list it with you for 1 month and see if you can make it happen. And I say, well, we're gonna talk about the price, because if it is not priced amazingly aggressive, I'm not taking a listing for less than 6 months. I won't take a listing for a month. It's just not gonna happen. But I may come down a little bit off that 6 months if they're very motivated and they want to get it sold and they're gonna price it accordingly. But I would say less than 6 months is probably not a very good idea. I know that during COVID times for the last couple of years here, that things were selling very quickly. But let me tell you what, in the other 21 or so years of my 25-year career, they didn't sell that fast, and we're moving back in the directions where they don't sell that fast. So expecting that you're gonna sell a listing in, 5 days is something that you guys might want to reconsider. So my go-to is 6 months or a year. Okay?
I have a question, Brian, if that's okay.
Yep.
So question, listing agreement, they only want to do a month using our example. You get it under contract in the first 2 weeks. It still takes 45 days for it to close.
Yeah, you're
Is
allowed to
that not a part of that listing timeframe?
You're allowed to close transactions that are under contract. Yes.
Okay, even if
So
the
you're-
listing's expired.
Yeah,
Okay.
correct.
I've
Okay.
never ran into that, so.
Right? So this is one of those ones that everybody should be jumping at to read. Who wants to read this one? It's like 2 sentences. Who wants to go?
Okay, I got it. Consumer
All right.
disclosure. The seller acknowledges that seller has received and signed the Alaska Real Estate Consumer, Commission Consumer Disclosure.
Okay. What is the first thing you do before you have any conversations with anybody about real estate?
Have them sign the AREC.
You need an AREC. So this listing agreement assumes that you've already done that, because you should have. If you're at the point where you have a listing agreement and you're going through a listing agreement to get it signed, you absolutely must have an AREC signed already, or you should not be having those conversations. Okay, so our new contract, and this is one of the changes that I'll point out throughout this class. This is one of the changes that it had. Our old listing agreements used to go through and talk about what are the expectations. The new one just says, hey, you're signing the AREC, and the listing agreement is based on the information on the AREC, which is good because it's less redundant. But you must sign an AREC long before you're having any discussions about listing a property. Okay? Who's next? Go ahead and jump in there. I know Keith was he really wanted to read, so we'll let him go.
Okay, broker licensees duties. Brokerage licensees duties to seller are set forth in the Alaska Real Estate Commission Consumer Disclosure. Broker licensee further agree as follows.
Okay. There's not a lot of them, but does anybody have any kind of idea of what would be like a further agreement as follows?
Allowing Keller Williams agents or agents of the brokerage to market.
Okay, so that would be in a different spot. But this would be like, what duties are you agreeing to do above and beyond an AREC? Good. You don't really want to do any more duties above and beyond the AREC. Okay, so this would be like agreeing to maintain the property, even though the contract says we're not going to be maintaining the property. We don't do that. So basically the duties set forth in the AREC are what we want to follow. If for some reason you have something weird that you want to add to that, that's a possibility, but generally this is going to be left blank. Okay? Next, who wants to read? This is a little bit more of a reedy one.
I'll take care of it.
Man,
Okay.
Eric is all volunteer today.
Well, I love to go through things quickly. So
Let's do it.
So marketing, seller hereby, check 1. A, authorized brokerage licensee to commence with marketing, showing and publication of the property data in the Alaska MLS database during the term. B, authorizes brokerage licensee to commence marketing in quote coming soon status in Alaska MLS prior to actively showing the property. C, authorized brokerage licensee to delay marketing, showing and publication of the property until said date. Alaska MLS delayed marketing notice is required for C. D, request the property data not be placed in the Alaska MLS database, but authorize brokerage and licensee to market and show the property during the term. Alaska MLS non-MLS is required. Additional notices must be forwarded to the Alaska MLS within 1 business day of signing this agreement. Oh, that's changed.
Yeah.
Broker is a subscriber of Alaska MLS, a statewide marketing system in which real estate brokerages share property information, thereby increasing the opportunity for sale or purchase by consumers. As such, the brokerage and licensee is required to submit the property information to Alaska MLS within 1 business day of the seller's signature on the agreement. Brokerage licensee is not permitted to solicit or encourage seller to refuse to allow the property information to be submitted to the Alaska MLS.
And good eye, Erica. You are correct. That is a change. That is one of the most recent changes in our documents. But let's go through what these mean. So the first one says we're going to go ahead and today, because it's given us 1 day, today we're going to sign the listing agreement. We're going to make this sucker live. We're going to start marketing it today. We're ready to roll. B is coming soon status, which is allowed to have incoming soon status for how many days? Anybody got an answer for me on that? How long do we
14.
allow? 15 days, correct. Good job. 15 days it's allowed to be in coming soon status. In coming soon status, we can market the property however we choose. It will be in the MLS. What can we absolutely not do in coming soon status?
Show the property.
Joe,
We are
property.
Yeah, we are not allowed to show the property. We are not allowed to show the property to our clients. I guarantee if you haven't had this already, the second you make an offer, a property coming soon, you're gonna get a call from an agent that says, I see that it's in coming soon status. Can you let me in to see it? The answer is absolutely not. Until everyone can see it, nobody can see it, especially your own clients, because that will get you in trouble. If you take the advantage of saying, I have the ability to get my clients in and nobody else, you are breaking the rules. The best way to get a property sold for the most amount of money is to get in front of the most amount of people. And if you're limiting that for any ways, that is not an advantage to your seller. C, this is delayed marketing. This means that we are delaying marketing. We are not allowed to market the property in delayed status. That means we are not allowed to share it. We're not allowed to call our friends and say, psst, psst, by the way, I got this great listing coming on. Delayed marketing means all marketing is delayed and nobody should know about this property until it either goes to coming soon or becomes active. Okay? And in order to do that, you need to have the delayed marketing notice signed and it needs to be emailed to the MLS. How long can you have a property in delayed status? Question. Anybody? You can have it in delayed status as long as you and the seller want to agree to it. It can be in delayed status for a year if you want, but nobody is allowed to know about it. Okay? Now, in delayed status, you can make it live immediately, or you can go from delayed status to coming soon for 15 days and then go live. That's up to you and the seller what you guys choose to do. But ultimately, until it's active, nobody's allowed to see the property. The last one, D, is non-MLS. What would be a reason potentially that a seller would not want his property to go into MLS?
Law enforcement, politician.
Yeah, law enforcement's a great one. I had a federal investigator who didn't want people in prison to be able to do a virtual walkthrough of his home and see all the pictures of his family and you know, where his bedroom is located and all of those fun things online. So they decided they did not want to go into MLS at all. Any other reasons why maybe somebody would want to go non-MLS? Keith might have an answer for me on this one. He's maybe not thinking about it, but maybe it's a remote property and they don't want people to know that it's on the market and it's remote and that there's nobody there, so that people just show up randomly to a remote property in the middle of nowhere. So maybe they don't want a remote property to go on there in order to avoid people just wandering around on their remote property. Okay, maybe it's a divorce situation where maybe they're uncomfortable. Maybe it's a domestic violence situation where they don't want their previous their ex or whoever it happens to be to know and be able to call somebody and just do a walkthrough of their home. There's a lot of reasons why maybe somebody does not want to go into the MLS. Can I ask you guys all a question, and I'd like to get an answer from you? Does this make your job harder? 100%. It does, because the MLS is what syndicates everything out to all of these other websites. So if you go non-MLS, please make sure that you understand you're going to have to work a little bit harder to do this, and you might want to give yourself a little bit more time. Is it possible to sell a non-MLS home? Yeah, 100%. It really is. It's just going to be a little bit different avenue than you're used to by just putting it in the MLS and hoping that it gets to everyone to see. Okay, but it's a possibility. Like Erica said, one thing that has changed in our documents, it used to be that there was a 3 days allowed for you to put something to the MLS active status. Now it is one. It is 1 day to change the status or make a property go active in the MLS. If your property is not active within that day, 1 business day, you will be fined. Usually $100 until you've done it the second time. Then it's $100 again. Then you get to the third, your fourth, your fifth time, and it gets more expensive and more painful, because then they figure you're doing it on purpose, and then they start to hammer you. Okay? So my advice is, the chances of you showing up at a listing appointment and being ready to fully list a property within 1 business day is pretty slim. Because we got photos, we got stuff to get ready, we got to get the dog out of there, we got to hide the kitty litter box, we got to clean up, we got to maybe put some paint on things. So my advice is, since they're now only giving us 1 business day to make the property active, I would always try to go coming soon, or always bring your delayed marketing form with you to give yourself a little bit of time. Okay? Because 1 business day is very, very difficult to have a fully active property ready to go. And the way that syndications work is, if I put a property live on the MLS is going to blast that out to 400 websites or whatever it happens to be. Most of those websites, when you make an update in MLS, will update on those websites. Some of them will not. So if you put a property on prematurely without the proper pictures, without the proper descriptions, for some of those websites, it's going to stay like that forever unless you physically go into each one of those property websites and update it individually yourself. Don't do that to yourself. There's too many of them out there. It's going to take you days just to go on and update all that information. So please make sure that when you're making a listing live and you're using the MLS for syndication, that listing is as good as it can possibly be when it first goes live. Okay? So always bring with you the delayed marketing, and always consider going into coming soon status, because having a home ready to go in 24 hours is almost impossible.
Hey,
Especially-
Brian,
Yeah.
why did they make that change? I mean, 3 days I thought was reasonable. 1 is not.
It's brutal.
Why was that change?
Yeah. So I think they felt that people were taking advantage of the 3 days in order to sell the property on their own. And they were using that 3-day window to go out and market the property as much as possible and not putting it in the MLS, so that they could give themselves an opportunity to get 2 sides of the deal, which is not in the best interest of your client.
So the majority of licensees were doing that, or just like
No,
a nasty
not
few?
a majority, but also we never get penalized for what the majority is doing. We get penalized for what the minority is doing. And there were agents out there who would not put the property in the MLS for 3 days, and magically they had a lot of double-sided transactions that never went on the market.
It seems odd. Because this happened a while back where they actually changed with the coming soon. They didn't want people to market it, and they accused agents, actually even from our brokerage, of double siding things, but they didn't. Like, the information and the data was inaccurate. So they said it was because of what you're saying, but that actually didn't actually happen. So this is
I agree.
weird.
So one thing that I've been talking about in our sales meetings for a while now is if we don't like rules, we need to be on those boards to make sure that we're the ones that are helped to making the decisions on how those rules are formed. And we currently do not have enough people in the board of realtors and on the MLS boards in order to get the decisions that we want made. So the people who are currently on the boards have decided that people were taking advantage of the situation, so they made it one day. We can agree with it or we can not, but let me promise you, we can agree with it or disagree all we want. If we don't follow the rules, we get fined. So that's unfortunate, but that is a big change. So please watch that one day. And because we have always, it's been 3 for so long, we just, like you did, we're just default 3 days, and you're going to go ahead and you're going to put that in there. They're going to send you a fine, and you're going to say, but it was within the 3 days, and they're going to go, ha, you don't read your contracts. The new contracts say 1 day, and they give you a fine for it. Okay. So coming soon or delayed marketing, you always want to go down that road because 1 day is realistically not going to happen. Okay. Next, the terms, you're going to complete a listing price. One thing that a lot of people do is they go to a listing appointment and they put to be determined on the listing price. Okay. First of all, as a broker, that makes my brain hurt that we have made this important contract and we haven't even decided what the sales price is. But if you do choose to put to be determined on there, please don't. But if you do, please understand that you must determine in writing what that number is. You can't just throw it on the market after a phone conversation and expect that your contract is valid. You need to do a status change update form that we'll talk about later, but we need to complete the listing price. Please don't do to be determined. That's not a great method. And if you do, you're going to need to take an extra step, because saying to be determined, having a phone conversation, seller goes, yeah, we're going to list it for 500. You put it on the market at 500. That is not determined. It has to be in writing. If it's not in writing in real estate, it is what? It doesn't exist. Okay. It's not valid. Okay. We want to make sure that the seller has the ability to sell the property. We need to always do a net sheet. Okay. We should always have a net sheet. One thing that's for sure is that we as professionals have a really good idea on what a seller is going to take home with them after all of the commissions and closing costs are paid. But what is an uneducated, and I don't mean uneducated in life, I mean uneducated in the real estate process. What is an uneducated buyer think they're taking home with them when you tell them their house is going to sell for 500? They think they're walking away with 500. A lot of them don't realize that there are commissions and costs that come out of that. And until we have the ability to break that down and show them, they have no idea what the actual expense of selling a home is. So that net sheet is vital to be able to say, this is really what you're looking at. The sales price is here. Our commission is here. The most likely is that you're going to have a selling commission that's here. Here's your title fees. Here's appraisal fees. You got a well and septic that needs to get looked at. You're going to need to update your at all of these things that they have no clue that they're going to have to pay for, but you do. So make sure we're doing those net sheets. Okay. Always look at the property profile and deed, because again, we want to make sure that the person that you're talking to has the ability to sell the property. This comes most common a problem when we're dealing with the property that's been a marital residence, meaning the folks that live there are married and they've lived in that home for one business day. If you live, or in 1 day, not even business day, if you live in a home for 1 day as a married couple, what is that now called? Community property. Okay, so that means that in the state of Alaska, if you live in a home as a married couple, now you both have rights to that home. And I've had a lot of conversations with sellers when they say, well, this is my home. I'm on title. I'm on the note. My wife or my husband, whichever one it is, they don't have any rights to this property. Okay, have you lived in it together? Well, yeah, we've lived in it together for 10 years. Okay, well, you're misinformed. Because now this is a property that is owned by both of you, because that's what Alaska state law says. So let's have a conversation with all of us, because now I've wasted my time having a conversation with just you when the spouse is not available. And now I have to have that conversation again with the spouse. Okay? So make sure you know who owns the property and that you're asking the proper questions. And is the seller current on payments and taxes? If you're not current on payments and taxes, what's usually a hidden expense that people don't think about? When they're late on their payments and they're late on their taxes? What does Uncle Sam always tack on top of?
Penalties and interest.
Penalties and interest, baby. Absolutely. They all say, well, I got this little letter in the mail and this tells me what I owe. Well, that may not be what you actually owe. That's your remaining balance on your note, but that does not mean that that's what your payoff is going to be. And if you're late on your taxes, or if you're late on your payments, I promise you that there is interest and penalties on top of that they're probably unaware of. So that's a good question to ask. Another one that I want to keep in mind is, and we're coming out of COVID and we're pretty much out of it, but there were a lot of people during COVID who had a loan modification. Mm-hmm. So another question that I like to add is, during COVID, did you do any kind of loan modifications or any kind of relief was given to you by your lender? Because if that was the case, that is something that needs to be considered, because a lot of people think, well, I didn't make my payment for 9 months and then they let me remodify my loan, so that 9 months went away. No, it didn't. That 9 months of interest was just tacked on the back end of the loan 99.9% of the time. They didn't forgive it. They re-amortized it. Okay, so they may not be aware of the consequences of some of those loan modifications. So I like to ask them, at any point during COVID, did you work with your bank to modify your loan? And if so, you need to have a conversation with them in the bank as to what effect that might have had on their loan. Okay?
Also asking, if they have a second.
Yeah.
Are there any additional loans or HELOCs?
Yeah. That was going to be my next one. So any seconds, usually a second will show up on the title report, but sometimes not always, especially if they've just recently done it and it hasn't had a chance to show up on there. HELOCs is another one. Home equity line of credits are something that you would want to know, because with a HELOC, it's different than a regular loan, where if you pull a second, they give you all of that money up front. Whereas with a HELOC, you may have $120,000 worth of equity that's usable, but maybe they only use 10,000 of it. Maybe they've used all of it. So with a HELOC, you want to look into how much is actually owed on that HELOC, as opposed to how much could they owe on that HELOC. Does that make sense? Okay. All right, next one. Oops. This one I'm going to go ahead and read through. Compensation is negotiable. Sellers acknowledge that the brokerage licensee has disclosed that broker's fee, hold on here, let me get this out of the way, services are not free. Compensation is not set by law and is fully negotiable. This is the most important change that we've had with the NAR lawsuit, is that everybody should know that commissions are negotiable. Okay. 6, compensation to brokers. Now, this is also a change that has happened in the last few years. If you got last year or so, if you haven't been aware of this, this is a big change that happened. When we used to do listing agreements, and for you guys that are new, just turn your ears off, because you don't want to hear what it used to be. You only care what it is right now. But for those of you guys that have been in the business for a while, what did we used to, in a standard listing agreement, put here in this first blank here where it says next to brokerage, where it says compensation from seller to listing brokerage, seller agrees to compensate brokerage blank %. What was the number? And I'm not saying we're not price fixing, so don't hold me to that. But what was the most common number that we would put there a lot of times in the past on the old listing agreements?
6.
I think mute. Or Keith, if you're on there, you might be on the phone or something. But what was the number that we used to see there quite a bit? David, please put on your camera if you can. What was the number that used to go in that spot? Anybody?
5 or 6%, or 7 or 8.
Yeah, right. It was,
10.
oh, I see you, David. Sorry, I saw your other one there that was off, so I apologize. You're good. So generally, that first number that was there was the total commission, right? So that would be 6%, 5%, 7%, 10%, just depends on, what you were charging for a percentage. But what was the most common thing to do was that was the full commission here. Now, with the new contracts, the buyer's commission and the seller's commission are completely separate. They are two completely different items and they're in two separate sections of the contract. Okay, so here the seller agrees. Oops. Where'd we go? Sorry, guys, if I make you sick. Okay, seller agrees to compensate broker blank percent of the gross sales price. This is where you're going to put in the amount of commission that you're going to get paid for the listing side of the transaction. So whether that be 3%, 2.5%, 10%, whatever it is that you're going to get paid on the listing side goes here. And then you have the option of doing like a flat fee, and agrees to pay any applicable sales tax and appropriate to the appropriate taxing authority not later than the date of recording. If I, the brokerage, procures the buyer under the terms of the agreement or other terms acceptable to the seller. The property is placed under contract during the term or any extension thereof and the contract records, or the property is sold or transferred within 6 months or whatever you put in there. After the term to anyone who is introduced to the property directly or indirectly through the marketing efforts of the brokerage licensee during the term, provided the property is not sold or transferred through another subscriber of the MLS. So what that section is for is, so say you get a contract where you're going and the buyer goes to the seller and says, hey, if we just cancel this deal and you let it expire, then I'm going to come back after it expires and I'm going to write an offer for you. That way we don't have to pay commissions. Okay, that's not how it works. You can't go around the agents. We don't do that. So this just gives you the ability that if you're the we call it a procuring cause. If you're the procuring cause of that client coming to buy that property, it allows you up to 6 months to still get paid on that transaction if they try to go around you. Does that make sense? Does that make sense, everybody on the old Zoom video? Okay, perfect. Now, with one catch, provided that the property is not sold or transferred to another subscriber of the MLS. So this allows that if it gets relisted, or if they go get another agent to represent them, then there may be a possibility that you are not considered the procuring cause anymore because somebody else has been stepped in their place. Okay, so like you got fired or something like that. All right. B, brokerage transaction fee. This is another change to the listing agreement that used to not be on there. It used to be that the brokerage transaction or processing or transaction fee was not on the listing agreement. Now, if you're going to charge a transaction fee, it needs to be disclosed upfront in the listing agreement, or you may be not entitled to receive a transaction fee because it was not disclosed. So if you pay a transaction fee for a transaction coordinator and you're going to be passing that fee on to the seller, it has to be disclosed in the listing agreement or you can't collect it at closing. I really like that because a lot of people used to try and sneak those fees in at the end. And people were hammered by $400, $500, $600, $700, $800 fees that they were not expecting. So now the new document requires that you put it in the listing agreement or you don't get it. We're having to be upfront and transparent, which is the best thing you could be in real estate, right? Okay, compensation from the selling to the selling brokerage. Seller authorizes brokerage to offer compensation to a real estate brokerage representing or providing specific assistance to a buyer, the selling brokerage. So this is where the commission then comes in for the selling side or the buyer side, right? We have the listing and the selling. And I know for a lot of new people, you get confused because selling feels like it's on the seller side. It's not. The selling side is the buyer side of things. Okay. And this is where you're going to put in here whether or not you're offering a percentage here. Now, a lot of people get confused about this because the rules have changed with how this works. And although a seller may be willing to pay 3% or 2.5%, what is the selling commission ultimately governed by?
The buyer service agreement.
Very good, very good. It's ultimately governed by the buyer service agreement. And if the seller says they're willing to pay 20% commission, but the buyer has negotiated with his realtor to pay 2%, which wins? The buyer's 2%, because they've negotiated that their agent is not gonna get paid more than that, because that affects the cost of the home for the buyer, and the buyer deserves the right to negotiate that. That's the whole basis for that NAR lawsuit, is that we needed to disclose that it is negotiable. And when we used to do it, you got paid whatever was in the MLS, that's what you got paid, whether the buyer liked it or not. That was the beef that buyers had. And so when we changed it, the buyers made it so that they were available and able to negotiate with their agent as to the maximum amount that they get paid. Okay? So no compensation is offered through the AK MLS. Sellers acknowledge that no compensation shall be offered to a buyer's broker through the AK MLS, but may be offered to other venues. So can you say I'm willing to pay you, the seller's willing to pay you, excuse me, X amount of dollars on Facebook? Yes, you can. Can you put it on a flyer? Of course you can. Can you put it on a sign? Sure you can. Can you put it anywhere but the MLS? Yes. Do I advise that? No. Okay, allow the buyer's agent to negotiate their commission through the contract. So when somebody calls me and says, hey, Brian, how much is your seller offering for the commission on the sale of this home? I say, put it in the offer and we will negotiate it out. Okay, so I don't advise you that you do that. I would say that vast majority of transactions do involve the seller paying for the buyer side of the commissions. It's very rare that they don't, but it's a possibility. And it's important that the buyer's agent negotiate that through the contract. If it is not on the purchase and sale agreement, how much you're gonna get paid, how much do you get paid? Nothing. Many years ago, we never put commissions on a purchase and sale agreement. Belinda said, please don't ever put anything about commissions in the purchase and sale agreement. When this lawsuit happened, they changed up their tune. Now it must be in the purchase and sale agreement or you get paid $0. Okay, so negotiate that there. Now, this is another change, and for those of you guys that are on conversations on the phone, I would like you guys to pay attention to this just for a second. The next thing that used to be on our purchase and sale, or our listing agreement, excuse me, that has been removed from this is concessions to the buyer. There used to be a section in here that said seller is going to offer X amount of concessions to the buyer. So generally that was buyer's closing costs, maybe it was a carpet allowance, whatever that may be. They have completely taken that out of the listing agreement because the MLS now no longer allows us to put any concessions to the buyer in the MLS anymore. So we are not allowed any longer to put buyer's closing costs allowance, a cosmetic allowance, a carpet allowance. None of those things are allowed in the MLS anymore. So they completely removed that. Okay. Now, can you offer that through any other venue but the MLS, just like a commission? Yes, you can. In the MLS, they will not allow you to put any money that goes from the seller to the buyer is no longer allowed in the MLS. That's a big change. That's a relatively recent change that has happened. So if you haven't been paying attention to the contracts, this is something that might sting you, because my whole life in real estate for 26 years, we were allowed to put in concessions. I had a big argument with the MLS about this because I think it's absolutely ridiculous, but I don't make the rules in the MLS because I would just get outvoted. But I think that that's a very disservice to our sellers, not being able to offer like closing costs and carpet allowances. But that's what the MLS has decided, so we no longer can do that through the MLS. Please don't do it, or you will get a $500 fine. That is not a warrantable offense. You will automatically get a $500 fine for it. Okay, there's one exception to this rule if it's worded properly, and that one exception to the rule is there is currently for new construction a energy rating program that will allow them up to $10,000 in rebates from Alaska Housing for any energy rated homes that were, the foundation was started after January 1st of this year. If you have that situation, please talk to me first about the verbiage and how you put that in there. But that's the only exception and the only reason why they allow for it, if it's worded the correct way, is it is not from the seller to the buyer. It is a rebate program from Alaska Housing that the buyer has to apply for and qualify for. So that's the only like potential, what I would call a concession, but they don't call it a concession. They consider it a rebate. Okay. So if you get a new construction that has that, please let me know and I'll get you the right verbiage. Okay. And then this talks about, if you're the brokerage, that's the listing brokerage and the selling brokerage, if the broker licensee procures a buyer that purchases the property, the brokerage is also the selling brokerage, and any compensation offered to the selling brokerage shall be paid to the listing broker. So that is if you double side it. If you have a buyer that you bring to the transaction, you also deserve to get paid for the buyer side of that, but you still must negotiate it through the purchase and sales agreement. And the buyer's agreement supersedes any agreement that you have with the seller. Okay? If the property is withdrawn from sale, leased, or rented without consent of the brokers, or made unmarketable by the seller's voluntary act during the term, seller agrees to compensate brokerage as agreed in paragraph 6A unless otherwise stated as follows. So this says that if your client takes the property off the market or makes it unsellable, they owe you the full listing commission, not the full commission of both sides, but the full listing commission. Okay. I would tell you that's a little bit harsh. Okay. You're getting paid a commission to sell the property. If you don't sell it, I personally don't feel you're entitled to that full commission. What I choose to do is I put in here, and some people will do, you need to reimburse me for the cost of photos or whatever it happens to be that you want to be reimbursed for. What I personally do is I put 1% of the current listing price. And here's how I do that. I want to be compensated for my time and expense. I spend more than $1,000 the first day I list a home on photos and lock boxes and everything that goes on to list a property. So I don't think it's fair if they pull that property off the market and not pay me something, because I spent a lot of money and time trying to help you sell your home, even if it's only a couple of days. So what I tell them is you owe me 1% of the listing price. Here's a good hook that you can add to that is one, I say, hey, the contract as it's written says that you would owe me the entire commission if you choose to take the property off the market or make it unmarketable. Here's what I'd like to do for you to help you. If for some reason you need to take the home off the market, the maximum that I would charge you is 1% of the listing price. Now, here's what I also want to tell you. If you take the home off the market and you pay me 1% for the cost and time and expense that I put into your home, when you're ready to sell, if you come back to me, I will list your property minus that 1%, so it won't cost you anything. Okay, so one, that makes it a little bit more tolerable for them to pay, and two, who do you think they're going to call when they do get ready to list that property if they've already paid you 1%? Me, right? Who do you think they're going to call if you let them off the hook and 6 months down the road they decide to relist it? Oh, my friend's cousin's brother's sister's friend got their license, and I'm really sorry, but I decided to list with them because I want to be nice to them. It happens every time. So by having that 1% in your pocket, it gives them a really good motivation to come back to you when they're ready to list that home. Okay, so that's how I do it. You can choose to do it however you choose, but that's how I like to do it. Okay, any input from you guys on that? What are your thoughts? Zoom World, Erica's got a thumbs up. Mid lunch snack. Okay, you like that, Amity? Is that a good thought process on how I do that? Perfect. Okay. Next, referral fees. What needs to be disclosed? What referral fees have to be disclosed? I'm gonna go to Zoom land. David, what do you got for me?
I would say any referral fees have to be disclosed.
Not quite, but close.
Anything outside our brokerage.
Correct.
So Alaska Group.
That's what I was looking for. So if it's in Keller Williams Alaska Group, if it's an internal referral fee, we don't have to disclose those. Any referral fee that is paid outside of Keller Williams Alaska Group must be disclosed. So if it's going to be somebody in Remax of Anchorage and I'm an Anchorage agent, I have to disclose that. If it's a, I don't know, maybe it's in Sitka, I don't have to disclose that. I just give it to my buddy down there and let him sell it and send me a check. But if it is a outside of our company referral, It must be disclosed, okay?
Hey, Brian, quick follow-up. So if you
Yeah.
get a referral from Hawaii, someone
Yeah.
moving to Alaska, but it's through Keller Williams, is that disclosable or no?
It is, yep. If it's not
Okay.
Keller Williams
Outside
Alaska,
of our group. Copy.
yep, outside of
that.
our group, it's required. Yep. Sellers authorizations, they need to understand that they're gonna be authorizing you to provide information to help close the transaction. Purpose of the AKMLS, it talks about that AKMLS is the greatest thing that's ever become to selling a home, and if you don't put it in the MLS, you're never gonna be able to sell your home. You have to use the MLS. And then we talked to them about what that really means. MLS is an amazing advantage, but it is not a requirement. Okay? We're gonna put signs and lock boxes on the property. What does that mean? This one here, 11, we talked about this today in our sales meeting. This is a vital one, and I think this is one that people put themselves hugely at risk for unnecessarily, and that is maintenance of the home. And Lindsay, you've been the quietest so far, so guess what? You're gonna be up next. Just giving you a fair warning. Property maintenance. During the term of this agreement, unless otherwise stated in a separate agreement between the listing broker and the seller, and that's where we had that one little, I said, what do you put in this spot? And then I said, the answer is nothing if you can avoid it. That's where you would have put this in here. That's the separate agreement. Between the listing broker and seller acknowledges that the seller is solely responsible for the property and its components, vacant or otherwise. The listing broker assumes no liability for maintenance, maintaining the condition of the property or providing security to the property. Seller will ensure maintenance, security, and upkeep of the property, including the maintenance of utilities and insurance. Neither brokerage, licensee, AKMLS, nor any subscribers of the AKMLS shall incur any liability for loss, theft, or damage of any nature or kind whatsoever to the property and or to any personal property therein. Unless you make the mistake of saying, oh yeah, I'll do that for you, and then you're in trouble. Okay, but this says we do not maintain properties. We do not check on properties when we have a huge windstorm. We do not go to make sure that the heat is still working, because that is a huge liability that you should not be taking that burden. It is the seller's responsibility, vacant or otherwise, to have the property checked on, because if you say, yes, Jeremy, I'm gonna go over there and make sure that your house is in tip-top shape while you're gone. I walk in that house, everything looks good. I leave that house and the heat shuts off and the house freezes up and there's $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 in damage. Who do you think they're gonna be mad at? You. Who do you think they're gonna say is responsible? Because you must have done something when you were there. Right? So we do not do that. We do not maintain any properties, nor do we agree to go check on a property. If that needs to be done, and it does, they need to find somebody to do that. There are people that you can pay to do that. There are friends and family that can take on that liability, but as an agent, we do not. Hard no. Okay, guys? Especially in Alaska in the winter. All right? We all on the same page of that one? That's one I want to make sure that we are all clear about. We do not maintain or check on properties for the seller. Got a thumbs up? David, Lindsay, Erica, everybody. We do not maintain properties. Perfect. Excellent, guys. Now, this is a conversation that is important to have at the listing appointment so that you make sure they understand up front that we don't do that. Okay? And then they can arrange easily for someone else to do it, but it's just not us. Okay, other terms. Addendum or amendment to the exclusive right to sell. Now, for a little while there, they did not have a spot for anything additional on the exclusive right to sell. We had it, and then they took it away, and they just now put it back. So we do have an 18 there with additional terms and conditions on the contract, which is a recent change from a recent change. So that is where you're going to then put on there that the seller is going to allow Keller Williams agents to market the property, because without an exclusive right to sell, can anybody market a property without written notice from the seller? No. You have to have, because otherwise, what would stop me from going, hey, I'm a realtor, putting up a Facebook post for Sharon Shaw's house, saying this is a really cool house that could be for sale. But I don't have any agreement with her. She doesn't intend to sell her home in any way. So without that hard break of it must be in writing from the seller, we could really market any property for any reason, whether it's for sale or not, right? Is it completely, inappropriate and potentially illegal? 100%. But that's what determines whether or not you can market a property is written agreement with the seller. And that includes other agents doing open houses, other agents putting it on Facebook, other agents marketing a property that they don't have agreement from the seller to do. So in our company, we require written notice from the seller to allow other agents in Keller Williams to market the property. As an agent, is it to mine and my seller's advantage within reason to have 50 people marketing that property for my seller? As long as they're doing it the right way? Absolutely it is, right? So there's some huge advantage to being part of the biggest real estate company in the state. And that advantage is we have wonderful new agents that are hungry that want to be able to market the home for you. So what I do is when I list a property, every listing that I have, I put in the additional terms and conditions that any Keller Williams Realty Alaska Group agent is allowed to market the property. That allows me to not have to, every time Jeremy calls me and says, can I do an open house there, to have to go get another form signed by the seller. The old way of doing things, you reached out to the listing agent and said, hey, do you mind if I market the property? Listing agent said, sure, never checked with the seller. That is not allowed per the state of Alaska. And they really have started cracking down on that. So if you want to have the advantage of having others in your company help you to market the property, put it in the listing agreement. Okay?
And also, if you don't have that in your listing agreement, I've heard two things. Is it acceptable to have an email from the seller
It's in writing.
authorizing?
That's in writing. Yep.
And then if we are, marketing the property, should we be keeping that in our file, or is that?
I would keep it in your file.
Okay,
Yep.
so as the person marketing who is not the listing licensee, it would be in our best interest to keep that
Correct.
in writing.
Correct. Okay, so also listing exclusions, that would be things like, hey, I will not sell my home to my ex-wife. Or I will not sell my home to my brother who I don't get along with. Or maybe it is, hey, I've already been negotiating with Jeremy to sell this home to him. If Jeremy decides to buy the home, I don't want to pay you a commission. So we're going to exclude Jeremy from the contract, and you're going to list the home. And if you sell it to anyone else, you get paid. But if you sell it to Jeremy, he and I have already been working on this. You don't get paid for that. So that would be a listing exclusion. And then we talked about the non-MLS clause. Okay. So purpose of non-MLS coming soon and delayed marketing. We talked about this. So we're going to kind of skim through this. It's not allowed to do, it's there to allow the sellers to do repairs, to schedule listing services, to get photos, to put a sign up, to get lockbox. It's there to meet the seller's timing needs, not to meet your timing needs. It's not there in order to try and help you make more money. That's the point. Okay. So it's not the purpose of non-MLS or coming soon listing to sell or attract new buyers without listing or cooperation with the other brokerages, to sell in-house without cooperation with other brokerages. What allows a licensee to market a property for sale? We talked about that. Seller's authorization in writing. And how does the MLS membership affect this? And the answer to that is MLS membership is affected by this because we are supposed to put any listings that we have into the MLS with the exclusion of non-MLS. And it must be done in writing, and it must be provided in the MLS to the MLS so that they can see that that was your seller's decision to not put it in the MLS, because we are not allowed to encourage people to not put properties in the MLS. Make sense? Okay. So listing broker is a subscriber. And I'm not going to read through all this because it's not really necessary, but the most important thing is that it is required that we submit the property data to the MLS within 1 business day of the seller's signature, and that we're not permitted to solicit or encourage the seller to refuse to allow the data to go into the MLS. So the seller acknowledges that he or she has signed a listing contract with an MLS brokerage and requests that the property data not be placed in the MLS. This next one is another change that has recently happened. Seller further acknowledges that while the contract with this licensee and or team, the property may not be entered in the MLS for the duration of the contract or 30 days, whichever is greater. Up until they made this 3-day, 1-day change, this was another change that they made. It used to be that it was 180 days or the listing time contract, whichever is the longer of the two. So if we did non-MLS, I was not allowed to put it in the MLS for 180 days or the term of the contract, which is ever longer. So now they've reduced that down to 30 days. So now if we go non-MLS and we decide we're going to go MLS at some point, you have to wait 30 days or the duration of the contract, whichever is greater. Okay, so that's a big change, and I think that was a good move forward because 180 days is ridiculous. And what they're trying to avoid is somebody going and saying, hey, seller, let's try not putting it in the MLS because I'd really like to double side this deal. But if we can't find you a buyer, then we'll go ahead and put it in the MLS. Because again, that's not an advantage for your seller. The best way for your seller to get the most money is to get in front of the most people. And when you limit that, it diminishes the value of that home. Does that make sense? Okay, perfect. So seller authorizes broker to commence with marketing and showing of the property, and the seller acknowledges that this will withhold the property from all MLS marketing opportunities. So that being said, you can't use that really cool broadcast email in the MLS to send it out to everyone in the MLS if it's non-MLS. So you can't use the MLS tools of marketing either. Does that make sense? Great. On to the next. Delayed marketing. We talked about this as well. Seller acknowledges that he or she has signed a listing contract with the MLS brokerage and requests the property be not placed in database be delayed. Seller acknowledges there will be no marketing until such time as the property is entered, coming soon in the MLS, and there will be no showings of the property until the listing is in active status. Okay, so we talked about what a delayed marketing is. It's no showings whatsoever until it either becomes active or becomes coming soon. And then it does say that you may enter it in coming soon status after delayed status for up to 15 days before you start showing. So you can go non-MLS for as long as you want. Then you can go 15 days coming soon, and then you can go active, or you can go straight from non-MLS to straight to active. That's up to you. Okay. And if you do get your property done earlier than expected, you can put it in early. Here's the only caveat to that. If you've been telling everyone that it's going to be in coming soon status for 15 days, and then you put it in early, please expect some angry calls, because a lot of those people are waiting for those 15 days to get their buyers in. And when you put it on the market early before letting them know that, most of them are just sitting around waiting for that 15 days. They put a note in their computer to give them an alert. And all of a sudden it shows up on the market early. They didn't have a chance to see it go live. They had a ready, willing, and able buyer that maybe was willing to give your seller the most money, who has now missed out on it because you decided to put it in early. So if for any reason you decide to go active early, I would advise you guys while you're incoming soon to keep track of people who have contacted you about seeing this property and reach out to them and say, hey, by the way, we're going to go live a little bit early because we got done sooner than we thought. Also know that there are going to be still people that might be upset because although they didn't reach out, they were expecting that date. So just be careful about making it go early when you've already published what day it's going to go live. Make sense? Mm-hmm. Okay. Status change input form. When do we use a status change input form? Anybody, everybody, Keith, Amity, anyone, David, when do we use
when the status changes?
Anytime the status changes. You are smart, David. You are quick. The name didn't give it away, but go ahead, Keith.
So there's a form to change the status.
Absolutely. It's a status change input sheet. Yes. So anytime you go from active to pending to closed, price changed, any of those things, you're supposed to be doing a status change input form. And the reason for that is if we have a conversation on the phone and we change the price, and your seller seems like they're on board with that, and then you receive an offer at that lower price and they come back to you and say, well, why is this such a low price? And you say, well, because we had a conversation saying that you wanted to reduce the price. And they say, well, I never said that. We need that status change input form so we can say, hey, this is a status change, and this is what it looks like, by the way. Can you see that, or is it awkward?
Yeah, not really. I mean, it's really small on my screen. I'll look through it, or I'll look for it on ours. I'm kind of on AKLMLS.
Yeah, Esme should be sending you copies of the forms as well. But anytime you're changing status, we need to have confirmation from the seller in writing that you're making those changes. Okay, so price changes are usually the most common.
No,
Okay.
no, that makes sense. But I mean, I'm sure it's better to have them sign something that says, "Hey, we agree to change the status or the price of the home." But would an email work?
I would say anything in writing is better than nothing in writing.
Got it.
Okay, but I would say the status change input form is the best form to use. Okay. Now, when we talk about putting a to be determined on your listing contract, to be determined must be determined, right? So if you're having a verbal conversation and you're coming up with an agreed price, that's when you need to have that status change input form to send to your seller so that we have in writing that it has been determined. So if you do a to be determined listing agreement, you will be required through our compliance to have a status change form signed by the seller to determine what that sales price is going to be. Okay, so first thing, don't do to be determined, please. It's the best thing, just avoid it altogether. If you don't have a choice, you need to do to be determined, and then it must be followed up by a status change form that determines the actual listing price. Okay? So anytime that your listing price changes, we're extending, that's also a really big one. If you're getting ready to expire and you're going to extend that listing, please, please, please get a status change form, because they may come back to you later and say, I never agreed to extend. So make sure that's a big one, because your listing a contract is going to expire. We need something in writing saying that they want it to go further. The other option is to just do another listing agreement, but at least something in writing says that they're going to be willing to keep marketing that home with you. Okay? Contingent, pending, back on market, canceled, and expired. Or if the listing closes. I think the listing closing is probably the least important one, but all the rest of them are definites. And all of these changes on the market also apply to the 1-day rule in the MLS now. When your property goes pending, you have 1 day to make it pending in the MLS, or you can get fined. Okay, so make sure that as you're getting pending and accepted offers, that you're changing that status as soon as possible. When you close a property, you have 1 day to put it in closed status. So just remember, from now on, you have 1 day to do everything in the MLS.
Question.
Yep.
So typically, I would hold off on pendings until I had earnest money.
Yeah, you could get fined for that. And I agree with you. Yes.
Interesting.
But do you have a signed contract? Yes. Is it in the letter of the law a valid contract until you have earnest money? No. Yeah. As the kids say nowadays, 6, 7. You know what I'm saying? Right?
Oh, God.
Right? Uh-huh. Okay. So now we're going to talk about short sales real quick. How many of you guys have dealt with a short sale? They're not much fun. Okay. What is a short sale?
When the seller has applied for like a hardship or something and the bank has approved them to sell it for less than the loan amount.
Correct.
Or
that is
for less
exactly
than
right.
value.
So, and then that leads into what you're talking about. Well, who is eligible for a short sale? And the answer is anybody that can sell their home for an acceptable amount to the bank, has a legitimate hardship that they can verify, and has no other ability to pay back that loan in full, may be eligible for a short sale. If they have any money anywhere, the answer is they will not be eligible for a short sale. And if the hardship is, well, I just didn't feel like making my payments, you're also not gonna be eligible for a short sale. So any types of retirement, any types of stocks, bonds, anything that can be liquidated, in order to pay your note in full, will disqualify them from a short sale. Okay, what's the process for a short sale approval? The answer is a long, drawn out nightmare of a process. And that's gonna include talking to the bank, finding out what their short sale package includes, and then getting all of that information wrangled together, submitting it to the bank. Then the bank has time to review it, and then they say, yeah, we think we're gonna go forward with this short sale, but we'll see how it goes. That's basically the answer you get from the bank. What role does a bank play in a short sale? And the answer to that is all of them. The bank is ultimately then the seller of the home. It doesn't matter if the seller wants to sell or not. It only matters then if the bank says that it's going to qualify for their short sale process. So the seller is basically, other than providing proof that they're not able to pay, they're pretty much excluded from the transaction. Because nothing they agree to that matters unless the bank agrees to it as well. Okay. Next question is, when do you determine if a seller is eligible for a short sale? And the answer to that is at closing, or should I say at recording, because the bank can stop a short sale at any point for any reason they choose until it's recorded. Okay, so you may find out that you may be eligible for a short sale up front or within a month or two. But if you're actually going to be eligible for that thing to close, you won't have an answer until it does. So just be aware that a short sale is not over until it's over. Okay? Oops. All right. Brokers advise the seller that the amount of money necessary, let me put this out of the way, to pay in full all loans and other debt or obligations that are secured by liens, including any IRS liens, all the property liens, as well as broker commissions and other costs of the sale, may exceed the current market value of the property. Accordingly, in order to sell the property, seller may be required to A, deposit his or her own funds into escrow, B, obtain the agreement of secured lenders or creditors, lenders to accept as payment in full less money than are owed for a short sale, and or C, pay back some or all of the shortage after the sale is complete. Broker has advised the seller that other options such as, but not limited to, negotiations and modifications of existing loans and liens, refinancing, bankruptcy, foreclosure, or deed in lieu of foreclosure may be more appropriate for the seller. Any sale of the property will be contingent on the lender approval. So what this is saying is, even if you can't afford to sell your home, there may be other options that work better for you than a short sale. Please be aware. Okay. Next, tax consequences. A short sale, and I laugh at this may. This says a short sale may result in taxable income to the seller. It is going to result in taxable income. So there's no real may when it comes to taxes, right? They're going for you. Okay. Credit consequences. A short sale, this is also hilarious. A short sale may have a negative impact on the seller's credit rating. When you don't pay back a loan in full, it will affect your credit. No question about it. Okay. Lender consequences. Lender acknowledges that a short sale is subject to lender approval, and the lender is not obligated to accept a short sale at all. They can choose to, and usually they have a ratio, and they say, as long as we can clear X percentage of what is owed, we're willing to go through the process of short sale as long as the seller qualifies, because it's more expensive and time consuming to go through foreclosure than it is to do a short sale up to a certain percent. That makes sense? Okay. Broker authority. Seller authorizes broker, and this is an important one because how often do the banks talk to you without written authorization about somebody else's loan? They won't. It's a hard stop. Okay. So seller authorizes broker to A, market the property for sale, B, contact the lender concerning lender's approval of a short sale, and seller agrees to give broker any necessary information to negotiate with the lender, and C, advertise in the MLS and other advertising mediums as a short sale, and that the property transfer and sales price are subject to lender approval. If lender will not cooperate, broker may cancel the listing agreement. So if you're told short sale ain't gonna happen and they owe more than they can sell it for, it allows you the ability to say, I can't keep trying to sell a home that's not going to sell. We need to get out of this agreement. Okay? Then the next question is, what's the best status for a short sale in the MLS? Pending lender approval.
Pending contingent.
Nope, active. MLS will
No.
not allow us to be pending contingent unless it's pending contingent on the sale of a home. So unfortunately, it's a weird, awkward kind of gray area, but the answer is you don't really have a deal until the bank gives you final approval, because the bank is the one that's gonna decide whether that sale is gonna go through. So just like a foreclosure, sometimes you see a foreclosure that's active and you call them, they say, yeah, we got 480 offers. And you go, well, why is it still active? And they say, well, because none of them have been agreed to yet. Right? So it's similar to a foreclosure in that case. Okay? Buyer personal service agreement. This is gonna be kind of the last little thing we're gonna go in depth on. And then we're gonna be done for the day, okay? What is the purpose of the buyer's personal service agreement? Go ahead. Lindsay, what's the purpose of a buyer personal service agreement?
I do not know. I am new and I'm taking it all in. Sorry.
All right, well, that's a good answer. I'm new and I'm not sure. That's why you're here today, so don't feel bad.
Thanks.
David, you got any ideas? You got an answer for me? Nope.
I do
maybe
not.
You do not. Okay, Erica, go. I see you.
I'm
I see you.
answered. Got it.
You were ready.
Okay.
You're ready to answer.
So the buyer personal service agreement is one to be transparent about how we are getting paid as a buyer's licensee. So they are going to choose whether or not we are showing them all homes on the market, whether or not they are providing buyer rep compensation or not. And just to let everyone know, I also bring these to my listing appointments now, so the sellers understand what the buyers are now looking at, and by law what we have to present. Not only the AREC, but now the buyer's personal service agreement is required by law for us to present. So it's just basically transparency, and so how we know we're getting paid, and how the buyer and potentially the seller knows how we're getting paid.
Great, so that's one of those things we put on, what do we bring with us to be prepared for a listing agreement? Maybe a buyer's contract, so they see what the buyer's gonna be dealing with. That's a great idea. I like that, Erica. That's a good suggestion. Okay, so what the purpose of a buyer's personal service agreement is to establish a legal relationship and to explain how we will be compensated within the transaction. Two purposes, okay? Who is and who is not a party to the buyer personal service agreement? One of you guys give me an answer.
Who is the buyer and the buying agent,
Mm-hmm.
and then who is not is the listing agent and the seller.
Okay, and the broker, because this is an agreement generally between the buyers and the sellers. In the past, we never really would go after a buyer for a buyer service agreement. Now that it's a requirement that we have, we're wading into those waters a little bit because, you know, people are now trying to figure out how to not pay agents on the buyer side. And we're working on making sure that if we're wading into that, we're trying to enforce those buyer services agreements now that that's a required part of the transaction. Okay. What does the Realtor Code of Ethics dictate regarding asking to work with a consumer that is contractually obligated to another realtor or licensee? This is an easy answer, guys. What does Code of Ethics say about trying to take a client from someone else?
Don't do
We
it.
don't
Yeah, don't do
We
it.
don't. We do not do that. Now, a lot of people will ask the question, are you in contract with any other agents to purchase a home? Okay. This is a little different now that you're supposed to do that right up front. For me, I've never asked, are they in contract to sell or to buy a home with another agent? All I want to know is, are you currently talking to any other agent about buying a home? And if they say yes, I don't care if they're in contract with them. Good luck. I hope it works out for you. let me know if ever there's a time where you're not. Okay, I'm not looking for a loophole to take somebody's client away. So I don't care whether they have a contract or not. If you're working with somebody else, I hope it works out for you. There's plenty of other fish in the sea. I'm gonna go find somebody else. I don't need you to prove to me that I can't take you away. Okay, now that it's a requirement that you sign a buyer rep agreement, I guess that's a little bit more of an appropriate conversation. But the reality is, I don't want you if you're working with someone else. I don't have time for that or need for that. If you're currently in conversation to purchase a home with someone else, please, good luck. Okay? All right. How many times have you guys gotten in the past, well, I'm not signing that AREC, or I'm not signing that buyer's rep agreement or a buyer service agreement because no one else has ever asked me to do that? You probably heard that, and if you haven't, you will. The answer is, I don't know how other people practice real estate, but I follow rules and I follow laws. And the law and the rule says that I must have an AREC signed by you before we have conversations about real estate. And I have to just establish how I'm going to get paid moving forward. And if you're not willing to do that, this conversation is over. Okay, let me tell you right now, if the very first thing you put in front of them, which is an AREC, that says that this is here to benefit you, and they say, I'm not signing it, how do you think the next 6 months relationship is gonna go when you have hundreds of contracts to go over with them in the meantime? So this might be a clear escape from a bad client if you go to them in the beginning. Now, if you do a terrible job of explaining why, then maybe I can understand them being guarded about doing that. But if you explain to them that this is to their benefit and this protects them as a consumer, and they say, I'm not doing it, you say, neither am I, good luck. And you might save yourself a whole lot of heartache. Okay? All right. Any other questions about that, guys? Nope?
Nope.
Excellent. Okay, so the term of the agreement, licensee's duties, is set forth by the AREC. We talked about that. Agrees to as follows. We don't really put any additional stuff in there because the AREC really covers it unless you got something weird you want to add to the contract. And then it says that the buyer has duties as well, that they agree to work with you exclusively, that they agree that no warranties or representations regarding the value or suitability of the property, that you're not responsible for the structural conditions or the hazardous materials or environmental matters. The buyer is advised to obtain inspections of the property by professional inspectors and obtain advice from experts in any fields that they desire. But what is our job as a licensee? Our job is contracts. So if it has to do with anything other than real estate contracts, what is our duty as a licensee?
To pass it on to the.
To refer them to the professional that's certified in that field. We don't do inspections. We're not inspectors. We don't handle title. We're not title reps. We don't do appraisals. We're not appraisers. We help you with the contract. We help you negotiate. We help you to get things done. But if you have any question that's outside of our field of work, let me know and I'd be happy to pass on a few ideas of who you can talk to. Never one. Try to always recommend at least 2 or 3. So that way, when they choose which one they like, they can't get mad at you as easy, because if you only give them one and it doesn't go well, who are they going to be mad at? Right? So always try to give them multiple options if at all possible. Okay? And if we refer somebody to a third party for advice and assistance, the buyer agrees that we're not warranting them or guarantee that they're going to be amazing. Right? We're just giving them options to reach out to and decide who they want to work with. Right? Buyer agrees to, here's the important one, work exclusively with the brokerage licensee to identify, view, write offer, and procure property in the market area. So if you're going to be working with them no matter where they buy, the answer would be Alaska. If you only sell houses in the valley and you don't want to drive to Anchorage, it would be Mat-Su Valley. If you only want to... Go ahead.
Yes.
Was there a question? Nope. All right, onward and upward.
Let me double check. Yeah, 11.96 52¢.
Can you go ahead and give yourself a mute? Okay. All right. So this is where you're going to put your market area during the term of the agreement. Hold brokers harmless from liability resulting from
Okay,
incomplete.
perfect. That's what I needed. I just wanted to attribute it to the right person. So thank.
Good. All right. We're not gonna be held responsible for liability from inaccurate or incomplete. They're gonna provide the licensee with accurate information, including in financial information, that's the most important, and written authorization to obtain and verify funds. Be responsible, reasonably available to meet and view properties. Authorize buyer's licensee to negotiate under buyer's direction with the seller for the property of the seller or the seller's representative, right? Again, we're putting in here that compensation is negotiable. Buyer acknowledges that brokerage licensee has disclosed that brokerage services are not free and compensation is not set by law and is fully negotiable. Again, that's the most important thing that came out of that whole Indiana lawsuit that everybody's heard about. Okay, compensation. If a buyer purchases, including the contract to purchase, an exchange, move this out of the way, or a contract to exchange or an option to purchase real property located in the market area during the term, and the purchase records, or B, the purchase fails to record due to buyer's breach of the terms of the purchase and sale agreement, then the buyer will pay the buyer brokerage compensation as follows. So this says if they fail to perform or if they give false information, you could be entitled to your commission still. I would say this is a hard fight to make a buyer pay a commission that for a transaction that doesn't record. But if they intentionally tank the deal, there may be an option for you to go to court and try to enforce your buyer's service agreement. I would tell you it's a long, hard battle. There was lots of warning signs before you got to that point you probably should have been paying attention to, but I would say it is a possibility that you could go after the commission if it fails to record through the buyer's actions. Okay? Forms of compensation, we talked about this on the seller. There's a percentage of the gross. There's a flat fee. There's an option for hourly rate to be billed. Please don't go down this road. Tracking hourly is really very difficult, but there is a possibility that you could track hourly. And there are some people down in the States that charge hourly until they get into contract for the cost of showing properties. Tracking this is a nightmare. Paying it out is a nightmare. We don't want to be involved in your accounting nightmare, so please don't do by the hour. Okay? A retainer fee. This is a little better, but you can ask for a retainer fee where the buyer shall pay brokerage a non-refundable retainer fee of X dollars due when the buyer signs the agreement. We'll get this out of the way again. If buyer acquires and completes a purchase of the property under the agreement, the retainer shall be credited towards the compensation due as provided in paragraph 4. So what this could be great for is if you're going to be showing 30, 40 properties to somebody and then they decide not to buy a home, that's a lot of time and effort. So there is a possibility that you charge an upfront fee. Say I charge whatever, let's just say $500 to start showing you homes. If you don't buy a home, I get to keep that $500 for wasting my time. If you do buy a home, your commission will be reduced by that $500, so you just pay the total amount of the commission. This may be an option for some if they don't want to be out there showing homes without any kind of compensation guaranteed. I would say this is going to be a hard sell when nobody else charges this, but it's a possibility. Okay. If there's a transaction fee or a brokerage fee that's going to be charged to the buyer, we have to disclose that, which again, I like that because being upfront is the most important. Unrepresented seller or seller receiving limited service. If a buyer purchases a property from a seller not represented by a brokerage licensee or from a seller whose brokerage licensee provides limited services, buyers will compensate buyer's brokerage provided in 4A. Yeah. Okay. Compensation after termination. We talked about this in the listing agreement. They can't go around us to try and close the deal without paying compensation. So you're allowed up to 6 months if you're the procuring cause. We talked about that in the listing. And that is if the buyer negotiated or entered into a contract to purchase which failed to record, was brought to the buyer's attention by the efforts of or actions of the brokerage through information secured directly through the brokerage licensee. So procuring costs. D, if a buyer acquires more than one property during the term of this agreement, absent a separate agreement, brokerage shall be entitled to compensation for each transaction. Okay? E, a brokerage will not receive compensation from any source that exceeds the amount stated in 4A unless the buyer and brokerage licensee execute a written amendment to this agreement to modify the compensation due to the broker. This is where we talked about the buyer's contract wins. So if you've agreed to a contract percentage with your buyer, doesn't matter what the seller's willing to pay, you cannot make more than the agreement that you have with your buyer. Make sense? Okay, source of compensation. We touched on this a little bit earlier. There are several different kinds of ways that you're going to be able to show properties. And one is that the buyer instructs licensee to arrange showings only on properties where the seller is offering to pay the entire brokerage fee. This is the only time I feel it is appropriate to reach out to the listing licensee and say, how much commission is your seller willing to pay? Because if they're not willing to pay your entire brokerage fee that's agreed to in your buyer's rep agreement, you can't show it. So if an agent calls me and says, hey, I have a buyer's rep agreement that says I'm not showing any properties unless my commission is paid, and my agreement with them is 3%, is your seller willing to pay that before I show it? It's the only time you really need to ask, because otherwise you're negotiating it in the contract. Okay. The next one is buyer instructs licensee to arrange showings on all properties, regardless of whether the seller is offering to pay compensation to the brokerage. If the offer of compensation to the selling brokerage is less than the amount specified in 4A, buyer may negotiate the brokerage compensation through the purchase and sales agreement. If the seller's offer of compensation to selling brokerage is less than the amount in 4A, buyer may accept the seller's offer of compensation on behalf of the brokerage and pay any remaining portion of the compensation due. Right? So say the seller says, I'm only doing 2%, and you have an agreement with the buyer that you're going to get paid 3%, the buyer can make the difference up if they choose to. Okay? And if negotiation for payment of the brokerage compensation through purchase and sale agreement is unsuccessful, the buyer agrees to pay the entire amount. So if the seller says, I'm not paying any compensation, the buyer agrees that they're going to pay the compensation on your behalf. Because you can't be involved in a transaction for free. It says several times that our services are not free. Okay? All right. And the last one is buyer instructs licensee to arrange showings on all available properties. Buyer agrees to pay the entire brokerage compensation. Broker will not receive any compensation from the seller. This is most common in commercial. A lot of commercial transactions, the buyer's rep is paid directly by the buyer because they want to make sure that the buyer is working for them and only them, and they have no financial relationship with the seller. Does that make sense? A lot of times this will become common in residential homes for sale by owners. They just say, I hate realtors. I'm not ever paying a commission. I refuse to do it. Then your buyers can say, okay, well, I really want that house and I think I'm going to get a good deal on it because they're doing it for sale by owner and they have no clue what they're doing. So I'm going to get such a great deal on that house that I'm willing to pay you to help me do that. And they can pay you directly. Make sense? Any questions about those 3 items online there?
No questions, but a way that I've overcome sometimes the negotiation of when a seller won't pay the full compensation amount that we're agreed on, is doing almost like a buyer's net sheet. And basically, these are your closing costs. Would be the full commission or compensation for me. Here are all your costs. Here's what the seller is willing to pay of that. And this is just what's remaining. And when they kind of see the value of that, I've had clients be like, you know what? Yeah, that makes sense. I'm good.
Yeah. And I will tell you that your value becomes really obvious when this happens.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. If you have not had a good buyer's consultation, if you have not taken good care of your clients, if you have not educated and informed them properly, then they go, well, why would I pay you? You haven't done anything for me. Right? So this is why the value of a buyer consultation has really upped its importance lately, is that if you can explain to them why buyer's agents are important, what you're going to do to help them and why you're worth what you're asking for, then when this conversation comes, it's a much easier conversation. Okay? Because if you have not provided value, you're going to get here and they're going to say, what have you done for me lately? Right? So being a good agent really matters. Can I ask you guys a question before we go on to this? Since this lawsuit has happened with NAR, have the average realtor commissions gone down or up? They have gone up. The average compensation to realtors has gone up. When the lawsuit happened, it was with the intention and the thought that real estate commissions will go down. And the exact opposite has happened because agents have gotten better about explaining why they have a job. And before, if a seller said, I'm only willing to pay 1%, how much were you legally allowed to get? 1%, right? Unless you had worked this compensation agreement with the buyer. Now, since everybody is doing this, it's much easier to then go to the buyer and say, hey, they're only willing to pay 1%, but I'm doing such a great job for you and you need my help. So you're going to cover the other 2%, right? And they say, yep, because you're good and I need you. So the actual opposite of what they expected by the lawsuit has happened, which is we've gotten better at explaining why we deserve to get paid. And so our commissions have actually gone up, which is amazing. Okay. Disclosure of referral fees. We already talked about that. Other potential buyers. You may have another buyer that looks at that same home and you have the right to show it to more than one buyer and maybe even write offers for more than one buyer. Okay. Attorney's fees. We don't pay for attorney's fees. That's between the buyer and the seller to cover. Mediation. We agree to go to mediation before we go to court. Termination needs to be done in writing with notice. And the brokerage licensee may terminate this agreement by providing written notice to the buyer, and buyer shall be under no further obligations to the brokerage licensee except for obligations existing in the termination. So this basically says you have the right now to give written notice to the buyer and say, enough, buyer. You have tried everything you could to crush me as in my soul as your realtor. I've had enough. This agreement is stopping. You no longer owe me anything, but we are going to go our separate ways. And I will tell you that learning that is an art and something that you will really appreciate once you do. Recognizing somebody who is wasting your time early so you don't waste more time with them. Okay? So you now have the right to say, we're going to go our separate ways instead of being stuck in contract for as long as it needs to be. Okay. All right. One more. Okay, so this is the end of our class. 2:05, and since we started about 10 minutes late, we're actually early. But I'd like to ask for you guys, especially for those of you guys who are online, I'd like to know from you guys, each one of you guys, I'd like you to answer one of these 3 or 4 questions. What is the best thing you learned today? What will you begin doing in your listing business that you weren't doing before? What will you never again do in your listing business? And what maybe we should have covered that we didn't have a chance to cover in these particular documents. So I want to go to everyone. And if we do it quickly, I'll get you out of here ahead of time. Give me an answer to one of these things. Go ahead, Keith.
Best thing I learned today is you guys have better forms than we do in Southeast Alaska MLS. Which I will be encouraging our Southeast Alaska MLS to be using, or looking more like. What will I begin doing? I like the change of status forms, and that's what I want to start using. And then what I'll never do again. That's a good question. Not go to a listing unprepared.
Good. You guys
How
don't
about
have
that?
to answer. You don't have to answer them all. You guys can just pick one, and I'll let you off the hook.
Oh, okay.
That's good. I like all of
sorry.
them. If you want to throw them all out there, we'll take them. Lindsay, what do you got? What'd you learn today? Since you're new, you should have a lot.
Thank you. As far as, well, I learned a lot, but what I've been doing mostly is property management. And so I am going to take some of this to my broker and see how some of these forms apply to property management rather than buying and selling.
Yeah, they're gonna be completely different, but just so you know,
Mhm.
completely different, but that's okay. There's an exclusive right to lease and all that stuff as well.
Mhm.
Amity, what you got?
I learned about the non-MLS changing to 30 days versus 180. I think could actually be of benefit in some situations that I've been in. So that was a good piece of information.
Yeah, for sure. Erica, what do you got?
I learned about the 1 day and the 30 day as well. So new forms. But then I also wanted to add something I learned from my own mistake is my I pay for my transaction coordinator. I consider it a business expense. I know some other realtors think, oh, nope, the buyer or seller is going to pay for that. However, our transaction coordinators, a lot of them will have cancellation fees. So I have my clients pay for the cancellation fees, and those are included in the exclusive right to sell, excuse me, as well as the buyer service, personal service agreement.
Perfect. Yeah, as long as you're upfront with them and they sign that they understand it, totally makes sense. David, what you got?
Yeah, I got out of real estate about 3 months before the big lawsuit, so a lot of this stuff is new to me. And coming from Hawaii, all the names are different. So I learned a lot of the different names for the same things I used to do. But all the stuff to bring to a listing agreement, that was fantastic information. So I really appreciate that.
Bring that stuff and be prepared,
Absolutely.
right? So now
Yep,
all the
thank
new
you so
guys,
much.
yeah, you guys should have lots of them. So what do we got? Isaac?
To do research on the property before the listing appointment.
Yep, it's a big one.
Yeah.
Right? Because if you show up with no information, you've already failed. Right? The more information you have with you, and nothing makes you look better than showing up prepared after someone has showed up unprepared. Right? You get somebody who walks in and says, I'm Brian Sherburne, and I got this little document here, and it says the house is here, and then this line here, and you should list it here because I say so. And then I show up afterwards prepared with a CMA, with information on the neighborhood, with a property profile, with all of these things. They go, man, you already worked harder than that last guy did, and you haven't even listed the property. I think this is an easy choice. Right? What do you got, Jeremy?
Not only looking at current property and taxes, but making sure that they did or didn't have loan modifications, HELOC or second mortgage.
Yep, it could make the difference whether they can sell or not, right? Yeah.
I would say the listing, a lot of the acronyms, I gotta obviously get a handle on, and learn those better. But then also the buying net and the seller's net. Yeah, those are good tools.
Yep, and you guys can get those, and Ignite RE has a net sheet that you can do an autofill net sheet. And then if you go into the MLS under daily functions, you can also go to calculators and pull a net sheet up in the MLS. So there's two different places where you can do those net sheets. Where everything is there, you just gotta fill in the blanks for the amounts. And those are available for you guys to use, so you guys can have an actual net sheet instead of trying to put it on a napkin and remember them all and slide it in front of your sellers. It looks really nice. Sharon, what did you learn?
I actually wanted to cover something we didn't cover today.
Okay, let's do it.
Okay, so what happens if you're listing a property that is tenant occupied? So there's a separate form that you need when there's a lockbox. You need authorization from the tenant in order to put a lockbox on the property, because our listing agreement just covers that the seller authorizes us to have that. But there's an additional form if there is a tenant occupied property. And then I guess what I learned was the status change form and having to do. Well, I knew about that, but
Use it for everything?
well, use it for everything, but definitely using pending the property within 1 day rather than waiting for earnest money. So no matter what.
So here's the next question I have for you. What else do you need to have when there's a tenant involved in a transaction?
Estoppel certificate.
Estoppel certificate and copies of the leases. So you would want those as well. Do we know what an estoppel certificate is? Okay. The lease is the written agreement. An estoppel certificate is a statement that you give to the tenant so that the tenant has the ability to explain what is their understanding of the lease. Because your initial lease might be, let's say, $1,000, but through the process, it's gone up a couple times, or maybe they decided to get a pet and there's an additional deposit or something like that to me. Or maybe after they moved in, the seller agreed that if they shovel the driveway, that they'd get $100 of their rent off every month. Those kinds of things may not be in the lease agreement, but when we give that estoppel certificate to the tenant has the ability to say, hey, this is my understanding of the lease. This is what's changed in the lease that I know. So it just clarifies what is the, actual agreement between that the tenant understands. Does that make sense?
And I have a question too on the lockbox thing. With that on a lockbox and showing, do you still have to follow through on landlord tenant rights of 24-hour notice?
Absolutely.
Before showing? So you can't just do same day showing?
Nope.
Not having to decide.
Written and posted
Yeah.
on their door, so we can give you guidance, and that's probably a whole separate class too. It is a whole separate class, but we'll be offering education outside of this. I'm in conversation with property managers to come in and talk to us about that.
Okay, guys, so one more thing. In order for you guys to get your certificate, the state requires that we do a evaluation, unfortunately. So I will be having my assistant send out an evaluation to everyone. So in order for me to send you your certificate of completion, I have to receive the evaluation. So my assistant Esme will be sending you guys all an email with the evaluation. I need you guys to print it, fill it out. You do not have to sign it, although you can, and then send it back to me. As soon as I receive that evaluation back, I will send you your certificate of completion, okay? So if you guys do not get your certificate of completion, it's because I have not received your evaluation, and the evaluation has to be filled out. So we'll get you that evaluation today. Just go ahead and reply with that evaluation back to me, and then we will reply with your certificate so that you can add that to your list of continuing education and get your license renewed. As we spoke about in the meeting today, please, please, please get your hours out of the way and renew your license sooner rather than later, especially this year. If you wait to the last minute, it's not going to be good. So if you still have additional hours needed, please let me know. We will be doing another in Wasilla and in Anchorage, so you have two opportunities. The next one coming up is going to be the purchase and sales agreement. That is a 3 hours of elective ECE, so you have two chances for that. We will be doing the required disclosures contract training class, which is 2 hours of DCE. That is your designated. And then I also have a 9-hour correspondence for 9 hours of elective credit. So there's still plenty of opportunity to get a lot of your hours out of the way. But please, please, please don't wait to the last minute this year, or there's going to be trouble at the state when you try to get renewed, okay? If any of you guys are struggling with how to get your minutes and your hours and your days of continuing education, please let me know and I'll try and point you in the right direction to get you guys some more hours, okay? All right, guys.
Sounds good.
Thank you for attending. Thank you all for participating. It sure makes the class a little more fun if we have participation. So thank you guys for participating. If you guys have any questions, feel free to let me know. You guys should see those evaluations in your email this afternoon, okay?
Thank you, Brian.
Thank you.
Hey guys, have a good day.
Thanks.
Hey, Brian, do you have the paper ones for us?
I do.
Okay.
Yeah.
By the way, I'm Jeremy.
I'm Ozzy.
Nice to meet you. Jeremy.
Jacob.
Nice to meet you.
Huh?
No.
You all are PC folks.
Okay.
So Jeremy, when you got licensed?
August. End
August,
of
okay, I
August.
knew it was like
August 26th, I want to say.